to DCS Spitfire Taxi and Takeoff Training. I'm Top Gun with the AKA War Dog Squadron. So, just like there is similarities between the P-51 Mustang and the Focke-Wulf 190, so there is similarities between the Spitfire and the Messerschmitt 109, and I'll show you the exterior. And as you can see, like the 109, the undercarriage is very narrow. The wheels are very close together. So as a result, the handling characteristics on the ground are going to suffer similar problems. So you're going to want to be careful of your taxi speed, especially in turns. You're definitely going to want to be extremely careful with takeoffs and landings as far as your attitude. So if you're coming in for landing, you want to come in slow, and you want to be precisely on track down the center of the runway and wings level when you touch down, things like that. Also, another thing to note is that the tail wheel in this aircraft does not lock, so you're going to have to stay on top of your turns, and takeoff rolls are going to have to be handled very delicately with the rudder. So I would suggest putting in at least some amount of curve on your rudder axes. You'll just have to tailor that to your controls and how sensitive they are. So let's go ahead and get permission from my ATC to get rolling here so we can get started.
Kudasi, in field 1-1, request taxi to runway. Enfield 1-1, Kutaisi, clear to taxi to runway 8.
Alright, I'm going to activate my controls indicator so you can see all of my controls. And that's something else to notice, is that when you're hitting your brakes, it takes a little while for them to get fully up to maximum. So they're not quite as instantaneous as some other aircraft are. Also, for takeoffs, bear in mind that you should not need any flaps. I mean, if you're doing a short field takeoff, you might try to get away with that, but putting some flaps out. But the flaps in the Spit are all or nothing. It's either full up or full down. So generally speaking, you're going to be doing takeoffs flaps up. So for takeoff, or for taxiing and turns, you're hitting the brake and then hitting the rudder pedal. So it's kind of like the steering in like the MkIX BIS and the MiG-21. So hit the brakes and then press on the pedals. And the turning characteristics of this aircraft is when you get a small turn started, it will gradually get more and more on its own if you don't reverse on the turn for the pedals. So you want to keep a close eye on your turns to make sure they don't get too out of hand too quickly. But as with all other World War II aircraft, you're going to be zigzagging to keep an eye on the taxiways. You'll probably want to make sure that the canopy is open so you can see better. I'm keeping it closed just so I don't have to deal with the engine noise. And since there is no tail wheel lock, you just have to get really good at getting lined up on the runway, and you just have to be very careful with rudder inputs as you're going down the runway for your takeoff roll. And I've found, at least personal preference for me, my best method for taking this off successfully without ending up getting adverse yaw and dragging a wing is just like I do with most of the other World War II aircraft, and I just gun it. So you get up to maximum throttle at full RPM, probably within just a couple of seconds, and generally you're just getting you're muscling the aircraft up to speed so quickly that there's really no time for it to develop any adverse yaw. So let's go ahead and get ATC clearance.
Kudasi, in field 1-1, request takeoff. Enfield 1-1, Kataisi, you are cleared for takeoff when ready. Climb 300 at QFE 29.77.
And again, if you're on a server that has external views permitted, there's nothing wrong with using the F2 view to get yourself, to help you get lined up on the runway. Once you've done it a few dozen times, you'll get pretty good at being able to line up without having to rely on it. But when you're first starting out, it's not a bad idea to use that as a helper tool. So, alright, so keep an eye on the controls indicator and we'll see if we can get this thing up. So you just kind of have to dance on the rudder pedals a little bit and be prepared for forward motion on the stick in order so that your nose does not pop up too rapidly. And once you're up, pull the gear in, and that's it. So the biggest issue I see people making in this aircraft is they're just being too timid about it. They're trying to throttle up very slowly, and because there's no tailwheel lock, it gets them into trouble. You know, they start getting into just a little bit of a yaw in one direction or another, and they overcorrect, and it just starts a mean cycle of overcorrecting back and forth, and it gets to the point where they start dragging a wingtip and then ground loop. So the big thing that I've found, like I said, is just make sure that you just don't give the aircraft any time to get you in trouble. So just, you know, gun it. So at this point, you can go ahead and turn off your navigation lights to get it ready for your fight. And as part of the startup process, your gun sight should already be on. So really at this point, you're just turning your safety off on the guns, which is this little switch right here on the stick. You'll have to have that key mapped because that's not really clickable in the cockpit. And like all the other aircraft, you know, you don't want to be at max RPM, you know, max throttle the entire time. So once you're up to speed, back off a little bit, let the engine cool down. When you're getting ready to get into a fight, you can go ahead and manually open up your radiator flaps with this switch right here into the aft position. And just keep in mind, you got to keep your eyes on your temps. So once you get up to 100% temp and the radiator getting up towards the top of that scale, you know, just like everything else, you need to just keep one eye glued to those and just keep those from redlining, at least not for too long. So anyways, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you.